Life is short, and the people we keep close shape the quality of our days. Some bonds bring peace, growth, and strength. Others bring stress, anger, and sorrow. Wisdom lies in knowing when to let go. Here are 8 signs that it may be time to step back, even from those you once called family or friends. Constant negativity is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry, and when it comes from someone close, it becomes even more destructive. People who consistently complain, criticize, or focus only on what is wrong in life create a cloud that follows you, no matter how hard you try to stay positive. Negativity is contagious. It spreads not through words alone, but through energy, through the way someone moves, reacts, and engages with the world. When you spend time with someone who dwells on misery, you feel it in your body, in your thoughts, and in the quiet moments when you are alone. Even if they do not intend to hurt you, their constant focus on problems becomes a weight you carry without asking for it. The mind is like a garden, and every thought is a seed. If someone always brings pessimism, fear, or criticism into your life, they plant seeds of doubt, frustration, and anxiety. Over time, these seeds grow into weeds that choke your clarity and calm. You may start to question yourself more, see obstacles everywhere, or feel less capable of handling your own life. Negativity erodes your judgment and your ability to remain steady in difficult situations. It is not about avoiding reality or refusing to face challenges. It is about choosing which influence you allow to shape your perception. A mind constantly exposed to negativity cannot think freely, cannot find balance, and cannot act with reason. Negativity also affects emotions in ways that are subtle but powerful. It creates tension, unease, and restlessness. When someone continually complains, it triggers the part of the mind that feels compelled to fix, to respond, or to agree, even when doing so serves no purpose. This reaction pulls you out of your own inner peace and traps you in a cycle of frustration. You begin to notice that after spending time with this person, your own mood darkens, your patience shortens, and your motivation diminishes. Even moments that should feel light or neutral become tinged with irritation or unease because your mental state has been influenced by another. Constant negativity can also mask itself in ways that are harder to recognize. It may appear as sarcasm, constant advice, or even concern. Someone might believe they are helping you by pointing out flaws, warning you of dangers, or highlighting mistakes. Yet this approach often comes from a place of habit or fear, rather than genuine care. They may be projecting their own dissatisfaction onto you, using criticism as a shield for their discomfort. Recognizing this requires awareness and honesty with yourself. You cannot control how another person behaves, but you can control how much space you allow their negativity to occupy in your life. Another effect of constant negativity is that it distorts relationships over time. When one person continually focuses on the negative, interactions become predictable and draining. Conversations lose depth and warmth, replaced by complaints, blame, or fear. The connection that once brought comfort can turn into a source of stress. You may find yourself avoiding interactions, feeling impatient, or thinking of excuses to distance yourself. This is not weakness or selfishness. It is a natural response to a repeated strain on the mind and spirit. Living with constant negativity also weakens your resilience. Life presents challenges for everyone, and the mind must remain clear to navigate them wisely. Being around someone who always emphasizes problems, obstacles, or failures dulls your ability to face your own difficulties with courage and calm. You begin to absorb their mindset, imagining worst-case scenarios or expecting failure, which limits your ability to act decisively. Over time, this pattern can make you less confident, less focused, and less content with your own life. In this way, constant negativity is not just an annoyance, it is a slow erosion of mental and emotional strength. It interferes with reason, clouds judgment, and drains the energy needed to live with purpose and clarity. It affects thoughts, emotions, relationships, and even physical well-being, because the mind and body are connected. When someone close to you brings relentless pessimism, it is not a simple matter to ignore. It becomes a persistent presence that shapes the way you see the world and yourself. Disrespect is a force that quietly erodes trust, dignity, and inner peace. When someone consistently shows disregard for your thoughts, feelings, or boundaries, it is more than a momentary annoyance. It is a signal that the relationship is no longer safe for your mind or soul. Respect is not a favor granted by others, it is a recognition of the value and autonomy of every person. When it is missing, interactions become a series of small, accumulating wounds. Each insult, dismissive comment, or violation of personal space chips away at your sense of stability. Over time, these small acts accumulate, and what once felt familiar and comforting can transform into tension, unease, and even fear. Disrespect comes in many forms. It may be direct, such as harsh words, ridicule, or public embarrassment. It may be indirect, appearing as repeated interruptions, ignoring your opinions, or dismissing your needs. Sometimes it is subtle, masked as advice or concern, but underneath lies a lack of acknowledgement for your autonomy. When someone repeatedly crosses these boundaries, it signals that they do not consider your feelings or thoughts to matter. This disregard affects your mind deeply because human beings naturally seek validation and connection. When respect is denied, the mind becomes restless, defensive, and hyper-aware of potential harm. One of the most dangerous effects of ongoing disrespect is that it slowly teaches the mind to tolerate what should not be tolerated. You may start rationalizing or excusing behaviors that once felt wrong. You may convince yourself that the person did not mean it, or that this is just how they are. While this may protect you from immediate conflict, it also erodes your ability to set clear boundaries. Boundaries are essential to living a life of reason and peace. When they are repeatedly ignored, you learn to accept intrusion, criticism, or belittlement as normal. Over time, this undermines your sense of self-worth and diminishes your ability to engage with others without fear or anxiety. Disrespect also damages trust. Trust is built slowly and carefully, but it can be broken in a single moment. When someone shows they do not respect you, it becomes difficult to rely on them in meaningful ways. You hesitate to share your thoughts, your plans, or your vulnerabilities because each interaction carries the risk of dismissal, mockery, or violation. Without trust, relationships cannot provide the support, understanding, and connection that humans need. Instead, they become a source of stress, anxiety, and constant vigilance. The emotional toll of disrespect is subtle but pervasive. It can manifest as irritation, frustration, or lingering resentment. Even after the interaction ends, the mind replays the words or actions, examining every detail and creating tension. This mental replay consumes energy and focus, leaving less room for calm thought, creativity, or purposeful action. It is a distraction from living well, from making choices based on reason rather than reaction. The longer disrespect continues, the more it seeps into your daily life, affecting your decisions, your confidence, and your peace of mind. Disrespect can also distort your perception of yourself. When you are constantly undervalued or dismissed, you may start to question your own judgment, abilities, or worth. This internalization of another's disregard weakens your resolve and makes it easier to tolerate further mistreatment. The mind, once clear and steady, becomes clouded by doubt and uncertainty. Confidence is replaced by hesitation, and the clarity to act in accordance with reason and virtue begins to fade. Recognizing disrespect requires honesty and self-awareness. It is easy to overlook or minimize the behavior, especially when it comes from someone close or familiar. But repeated disregard for your boundaries, feelings, or dignity is a clear signal that the relationship does not support your inner stability. Every person deserves to be treated with recognition of their value and autonomy, and the absence of respect signals a danger to your peace, your judgment, and your sense of self. When respect is missing, the relationship stops being a source of strength. It becomes a source of tension, a weight on the mind, and a distraction from living wisely. Each interaction reminds you of the limits of tolerance, and each slight slowly teaches the mind to accept harm as normal, reducing the clarity and calm needed to navigate life well. Manipulation is a quiet thief of freedom, and when it comes from someone close, it can go unnoticed for a long time. People who manipulate do not act openly. They twist words, emotions, and situations to serve their own needs, often at the expense of your peace and judgment. Their influence is subtle, creating a sense that their desires or opinions are aligned with your own, while in truth, they are guiding you toward choices that benefit them. The danger lies not only in what they ask you to do, but in the way they shape your thinking, slowly eroding your ability to act independently and clearly. Manipulation often begins with small gestures or comments. A person may insist on helping, for your own good, suggest decisions repeatedly until you conform, or use guilt to make you act against your own judgment. At first, these actions may seem minor or even helpful, but over time they form a pattern. Each small act of influence chips away at your autonomy, teaching your mind to rely on their input instead of your own reason. In this way, manipulation is not always loud or aggressive, but it is persistent, insidious, and deeply harmful to your inner life. Those who manipulate often exploit natural human tendencies. They know that you want approval, connection, and acceptance. They may appeal to your sense of duty, your care for others, or your desire to avoid conflict. In doing so, they make their requests seem reasonable, or even inevitable, when in reality, you are being led away from your own judgment. Over time, this erodes confidence, because the mind begins to doubt its own decisions and increasingly looks outward for validation. When your choices are shaped by someone else's agenda, the clarity to act wisely diminishes. Manipulation also creates imbalance in relationships. Instead of mutual support, there is control. Instead of cooperation, there is subtle coercion. You may notice that interactions often leave you feeling pressured, anxious, or uncertain, even when nothing overtly harmful was said. This feeling is the mind's recognition that autonomy has been compromised. A relationship that depends on manipulation cannot foster trust or respect. It fosters dependency, frustration, and quiet resentment. Emotional manipulation is particularly damaging because it operates beneath conscious awareness. It can appear as compliments with strings attached, criticism disguised as guidance, or concern expressed to create guilt. The mind naturally seeks to respond in ways that preserve harmony or reduce discomfort, but manipulation takes advantage of this instinct. Every response you make is subtly influenced, reducing your ability to act in accordance with reason and principle. The longer this pattern continues, the harder it becomes to recognize where your own choices end and the other person's influence begins. Being around manipulators also drains mental energy. Constantly evaluating their words, intentions, and hidden meanings occupies attention that could be spent on reflection, decision-making, or purposeful action. It creates mental fatigue and emotional tension, making it more difficult to remain calm, focused, and steady in life. The mind is forced to divide its energy between its own needs and the subtle pressures imposed by another. Over time, this leads to reduced clarity and diminished resilience. Manipulation also erodes self-trust. When you repeatedly act under another's influence, you begin to question your own judgment and instincts. The mind becomes less confident, more reactive, and more dependent on external cues. You may feel uncertain even in simple decisions, sensing that without their guidance, you are vulnerable or incapable. This loss of self-trust weakens your ability to live deliberately, because clarity and independence are necessary for reasoned action. Recognizing manipulation requires careful attention to patterns rather than isolated events. One-off mistakes, misunderstandings, or moments of pressure are not necessarily manipulation, but repeated attempts to control your choices, emotions, or decisions are a clear signal. These patterns reveal that the relationship is no longer a source of mutual respect, but a source of constraint, pressure, and diminished autonomy. When manipulation is present, the mind loses freedom, the heart loses trust, and the relationship loses balance. Autonomy is essential for living wisely and maintaining inner peace. Each subtle act of influence, no matter how small, accumulates, shaping your thoughts and actions in ways that are not aligned with reason, clarity, or your own well-being. Dishonesty is a poison that slowly spreads through the mind and relationships. When someone lies repeatedly, it is not just a single act of deception, it is a pattern that undermines trust, clarity, and inner peace. Human beings rely on truth as the foundation of understanding and cooperation. When lies replace truth, the foundation begins to crack, and the mind becomes unstable, unsure of what to believe or how to act. The person who lies may believe the falsehood is harmless or convenient, but the effect on those around them is profound, leaving doubt and suspicion in place of certainty and calm. Dishonesty often starts small. A person may exaggerate, withhold information, or tell white lies to avoid discomfort. While these may seem minor, they introduce a pattern in which truth is flexible and unreliable. Over time, small lies accumulate, creating a web of confusion that distorts reality. Each interaction requires mental effort to separate fact from fiction, to analyze words for hidden meanings, and to anticipate unspoken motives. This constant vigilance is exhausting, a draining energy and focus that could be used to act wisely and live peacefully. Repeated dishonesty also damages trust, which is essential for any meaningful relationship. Trust is built gradually, with consistent actions that demonstrate reliability and integrity. Once lies become frequent, the foundation of trust is shattered. Every statement, every promise, and every gesture is questioned. The mind cannot rest when uncertainty replaces certainty, and every decision becomes clouded by the possibility of deceit. In this environment, genuine connection and understanding are impossible, because one cannot know whether the other person is acting in good faith or serving their own interests. Lies distort perception not only of the other person but also of yourself. You may begin to doubt your judgment, question your instincts, or second-guess your understanding of events. Dishonesty forces the mind into a defensive posture, constantly evaluating, analyzing, and guarding against deception. This mental tension distracts from clarity and reason, making it difficult to respond calmly and deliberately to life's challenges. When the mind is consumed by suspicion and uncertainty, it loses the freedom to act with focus and purpose. Dishonesty also erodes respect. When someone cannot speak the truth, they show that they do not value the clarity and honesty required for mutual understanding. Words, which are meant to convey meaning, become unreliable tools. The person who lies repeatedly diminishes the weight of their own words and reduces their ability to influence or connect authentically. Over time, interactions lose depth and substance because the mind is focused on detecting deception rather than engaging in meaningful dialogue. Emotional strain is another consequence of repeated dishonesty. Being around someone who lies forces constant assessment and evaluation. You may feel frustration, anxiety, or anger, and even small conversations become a source of mental fatigue. The mind is forced to carry extra weight, analyzing what is real, what is hidden, and what the motives behind each word might be. This strain interferes with calm thought and deliberate action, leaving less energy for reflection, growth, and reasoned decision-making. Dishonesty often creates a cycle of dependency and caution. You may begin to adjust your behavior to avoid being misled, anticipating lies or carefully controlling what information you reveal. In this way, deceit limits freedom on both sides. One person loses credibility and clarity, while the other loses trust and ease. Both are caught in a subtle struggle that saps energy and undermines natural human interaction. Recognizing dishonesty requires careful attention to patterns rather than isolated incidents. A single falsehood might be an error or a lapse, but repeated concealment, exaggeration, or fabrication signals a relationship that cannot provide stability or peace. The presence of repeated lies is a warning the mind must protect itself from confusion, anxiety, and the erosion of reason, and clarity cannot thrive where deceit is allowed to take root. When dishonesty persists, the mind becomes unsettled, the heart becomes cautious, and the relationship loses the stability needed for mutual understanding, support, and harmony. Every interaction demands scrutiny, and every statement carries uncertainty, slowly shaping life around suspicion and doubt. Selfishness is a quiet but persistent force that disrupts relationships and drains the mind. When someone only considers their own needs, desires, or comfort, it creates imbalance and tension in every interaction. Relationships are meant to be a mutual exchange, a shared support system where both parties contribute and benefit. When one person takes without giving, it becomes a weight that pulls on the other, slowly wearing down patience, tolerance, and goodwill. Selfishness is not always loud or obvious. It can appear as subtle neglect, lack of consideration, or an inability to acknowledge another's needs, but its effect is no less harmful. A selfish person often prioritizes convenience over care. They may only reach out when they want something, or they may participate in activities only if it benefits them. Conversations can feel one-sided, where their stories, opinions, and needs dominate, while your perspective is minimized or ignored. Over time, this repeated imbalance teaches the mind that the relationship is conditional rather than genuine. You may find yourself constantly adjusting your behavior, suppressing your own desires, or minimizing your needs to maintain peace, while the other person continues to act without regard for the shared bond. Selfishness also interferes with emotional energy. Being around someone who is consistently self-centered forces the mind to compensate, to give more than it receives, and to constantly assess whether your actions will be acknowledged or returned. This imbalance creates tension, fatigue, and frustration. Even small interactions can feel heavy or draining, because the relationship lacks reciprocity. Human beings naturally respond to fairness and mutual care. When these are absent, the mind recognizes an injustice, which causes stress and diminishes calm reflection. The effects of selfishness extend beyond individual interactions. It distorts trust and respect over time. A person who consistently prioritizes themselves may not honor commitments, listen attentively, or offer support when it is needed. This creates uncertainty. You cannot rely on their actions, and you must constantly evaluate their motives. Trust, once the foundation of a stable connection, becomes fragile, and interactions become tactical rather than genuine. Respect for one another diminishes, because the selfish person demonstrates that they value their own needs above all else, including the feelings and well-being of others. Selfishness also affects personal growth. Relationships should provide opportunities to learn, reflect, and become stronger in character. When one party is focused only on themselves, these opportunities are lost. Conversations become shallow, support becomes uneven, and the challenges of life are faced more alone than together. You may find that your energy is spent maintaining harmony or compensating for the imbalance, leaving little space for self-reflection. reasoned decision making, or purposeful action. Over time, this diminishes the capacity to act with clarity and focus, because the mind is preoccupied with managing the effects of another's self-interest. Another subtle effect is the emotional strain it creates. When you are constantly giving or adapting to someone else's selfishness, feelings of frustration, resentment, or even sadness can emerge. These emotions are not caused by your own actions, but by the repeated pattern of imbalance. This strain reduces patience and increases tension, making it harder to engage calmly in other areas of life. Even outside of the relationship, the lingering effects of selfishness can shape perception, making you more cautious, less trusting, or more reactive. Recognizing selfishness requires careful observation of patterns rather than isolated actions. Occasional self-interest is natural in every person, but repeated prioritization of one's own needs at the expense of others is a clear signal. A relationship that relies on one-sided effort cannot support inner peace, mutual respect, or calm judgment. Every interaction is a test of tolerance, patience, and energy, and when the balance is consistently skewed, the mind becomes burdened, the heart grows weary, and the relationship loses its vitality. Selfishness shapes not only the relationship, but also the way the mind experiences life. It teaches the mind to give more than it receives, to accommodate rather than engage, and to accept imbalance as normal. In doing so, it undermines clarity, stability, and the ability to act with reason and purpose, leaving subtle but persistent harm over time. Jealousy and envy are forces that quietly corrode relationships and disturb the mind. When someone resents your success, happiness, or achievements, it creates tension and discomfort that spreads beyond the moment. These feelings are not harmless, they are expressions of insecurity and dissatisfaction projected onto others. Being around someone who harbors jealousy or envy affects your own energy and clarity. You may notice subtle criticism, backhanded compliments, or frequent comparisons, all of which carry the hidden weight of their discontent. Over time, this pattern becomes draining, clouding your thoughts and making interactions feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Jealousy often manifests in subtle ways. A person may downplay your accomplishments, question your choices, or suggest that you are not deserving of what you have achieved. They may constantly compare their own life to yours, creating tension in every conversation. While these actions may appear small or trivial, their effect accumulates. Each interaction requires mental effort to manage feelings of unease, to defend your achievements, or to carefully navigate the other person's moods. The mind, which thrives on clarity and focus, becomes burdened with unnecessary distractions, reducing your ability to act calmly and deliberately. Envy is similarly corrosive, though it often appears as a desire for what you have rather than active resentment. An envious person may attempt to compete, imitate, or subtly undermine you to feel equal or superior. This creates a dynamic where your success or happiness is never fully celebrated or supported. Instead, it is met with tension, discomfort, or passive resistance. Living in this environment teaches the mind to anticipate negativity, to measure interactions for potential harm, and to act cautiously rather than freely. Over time, this constant vigilance drains emotional energy and diminishes the ability to maintain inner peace. These behaviors also distort trust and intimacy. Relationships are meant to provide support, understanding, and mutual encouragement. When jealousy or envy dominates, these qualities are lost. The person who resents your growth cannot genuinely celebrate your achievements, offer guidance without comparison, or provide reassurance without hidden motives. As a result, interactions become tactical rather than authentic. You may start to withhold personal thoughts, accomplishments, or joys, anticipating criticism or subtle disapproval, which creates distance and reduces the meaningfulness of connection. Jealousy and envy affect emotional health as well. Constant exposure can generate irritation, anxiety, or even self-doubt. You may begin to question whether your achievements are truly deserved, or whether you have been too forward or confident. The mind, naturally inclined toward reflection and clarity, becomes entangled in the other person's discontent. Even if their envy is subtle, it creates a ripple effect that shapes your perception of yourself and your life. Energy that could be devoted to purposeful action, reflection, or calm decision making is instead consumed by vigilance, defense, and adjustment. These behaviors also signal a lack of respect. When someone envies or resents you, they fail to honor your effort, choices, and success. They view your achievements as threats rather than sources of inspiration, and they measure their own worth against you instead of seeking internal growth. Respect is foundational for a balanced relationship, and when it is missing, the connection becomes a source of strain rather than support. Over time, this lack of respect teaches the mind that tension, comparison, and emotional labor are normal in the relationship, further eroding mental and emotional stability. Recognizing jealousy and envy requires careful observation. One occasional expression of discomfort is natural, but repeated patterns of criticism, comparison, or subtle undermining indicate that the relationship is harmful. A person who cannot celebrate your success or happiness consistently injects tension into interactions, creating mental fatigue and emotional strain. The presence of jealousy or envy limits your freedom to experience joy fully, because the mind becomes preoccupied with managing the other person's reactions, instead of focusing on calm, deliberate, and purposeful action. When jealousy and envy dominate, the mind is unsettled, the heart is burdened, and the relationship loses its balance. Each interaction carries an unspoken weight, subtly shaping your thoughts, emotions, and energy, reducing clarity and weakening the capacity to act with reason and focus. Disrespect for your values is a silent but powerful force that erodes peace and clarity. Every person holds principles, beliefs, and priorities that guide their decisions and actions. These values form the foundation of a life lived deliberately and with purpose. When someone mocks, dismisses, or ignores what you hold important, it is more than an offense. It is a threat to the stability of your inner life. Repeated disrespect for your principles teaches the mind to compromise its standards and accept behavior or attitudes that are inconsistent with reason and virtue. Over time, this creates confusion, tension, and a subtle erosion of self-respect. Disrespect for values can take many forms. It may appear as criticism, sarcasm, or ridicule. A person may belittle your choices, insist that their way is superior, or pressure you to act against your beliefs. Even when framed as advice or concern, such actions undermine the autonomy of your mind and the integrity of your judgment. The cumulative effect of these behaviors is to create doubt, making you question whether your values are valid or worthwhile. This internal conflict consumes energy, distracts from clarity, and diminishes the ability to act with purpose. Being around someone who disregards your principles also fosters tension in interactions. Conversations and decisions become strained because every step may be met with resistance, disapproval, or unsolicited correction. The mind becomes alert to conflict, constantly weighing how to navigate the other person's attitudes while trying to preserve your own integrity. Over time, this vigilance reduces the ease and fluidity of relationships, replacing natural engagement with calculation and self-restraint. Your focus is divided between living according to your values and managing the risk of their being dismissed or attacked. This behavior also affects trust. Trust relies on a sense of shared respect and acknowledgement of each person's autonomy. When someone repeatedly disrespects your principles, it signals that they do not recognize your right to make choices according to your beliefs. Their opinions and judgments cannot be relied upon to honor your boundaries or support your growth. This instability in trust creates uncertainty, making it difficult to rely on the relationship for guidance, encouragement, or support. Without respect for values, connection loses depth and becomes transactional rather than meaningful. Repeated disrespect also produces subtle emotional strain. You may feel irritation, frustration, or resentment after even brief interactions. These emotions are not random. They are the mind's response to repeated violation of its standards and the persistent pressure to compromise. Over time, this strain reduces patience, diminishes focus, and makes it harder to act calmly and deliberately in other areas of life. The energy once devoted to growth, reflection, and purposeful action is diverted toward managing conflict and protecting your principles. Disrespect for values can also distort perception of self. When someone repeatedly undermines what you believe in, it can create doubt about the validity of your choices. You may begin to question whether your principles are too rigid, irrelevant, or inappropriate, allowing the critic's opinions to influence your judgment. This internalization weakens clarity and confidence, because the mind becomes entangled in the task of defending its standards instead of acting freely and wisely according to them. Recognizing disrespect for your values requires careful attention to patterns rather than isolated moments. Occasional disagreements are natural and can even strengthen understanding, but repeated disregard, ridicule, or pressure to compromise reveals a relationship that cannot support your stability or integrity. Living with such influence teaches the mind to tolerate compromise, to accept erosion of principles, and to carry tension as normal. This persistent pressure shapes thought, emotion, and energy in subtle but persistent ways. When someone consistently disrespects your values, interactions no longer foster growth, peace, or clarity. Each conversation carries the risk of compromise, and every decision becomes influenced by the pressure to conform. The mind becomes vigilant, the heart weary, and the relationship shifts from a source of support to a source of strain, subtly shaping life around tension, doubt, and diminished integrity. Emotional drain is a quiet, but undeniable signal that a relationship is harmful. Every interaction with a person should leave the mind and heart capable of calm reflection, focus, and purposeful action. When someone consistently leaves you feeling exhausted, anxious, or tense, it indicates that the relationship is taking more than it gives. Emotional drain is not only tiring in the moment, it accumulates over time, shaping your thoughts, energy, and capacity to act wisely. The mind becomes preoccupied with managing reactions, anticipating conflict, and coping with stress, leaving less space for clarity, reason, and inner peace. Emotional drain often begins subtly. A person may demand attention when it is inconvenient, bring constant complaints, or react dramatically to small events. At first, these behaviors may feel manageable, but repeated exposure forces the mind to adjust and compensate continuously. You may notice that after conversations you feel tense, distracted, or irritable. You may carry their problems, moods, or criticisms into moments that should be peaceful or neutral. Over time, these small accumulations create a heavy weight on the mind, subtly influencing decisions, moods, and the ability to focus. The nature of emotional drain is that it often goes unnoticed until it has a significant effect. You may begin to feel fatigue without understanding its source, or recognize tension only after long exposure. Your own emotions become entangled with theirs, and the mind struggles to maintain clarity. When someone repeatedly triggers anxiety, frustration, or sadness, it teaches the mind to anticipate negativity. Even neutral interactions may be approached with caution, as your inner state has been conditioned to expect strain. This constant vigilance consumes mental energy that could otherwise be directed toward reflection, growth, and purposeful action. Emotional drain also affects boundaries. When the mind and heart are constantly engaged in managing another person's moods or demands, it becomes difficult to maintain limits. You may overextend yourself, provide support when it is not reciprocated, or suppress your own needs to prevent conflict. In this way, emotional drain teaches the mind to tolerate imbalance and accept stress as normal. The result is diminished autonomy, reduced calm, and an increased risk of resentment or burnout. Relationships that drain emotionally also distort perception and judgment. You may find yourself second-guessing choices, doubting instincts, or reacting defensively in situations where reason should prevail. The mind, already burdened by persistent stress, becomes less capable of evaluating events clearly and responding deliberately. Decision-making slows, focus diminishes, and the energy required for purposeful action is redirected toward maintaining composure or managing the other person's influence. Over time, this subtle erosion of clarity can affect not only the relationship itself, but also other areas of life. Emotional drain often masks itself behind affection, concern, or shared history. The person causing it may genuinely care, or they may believe their demands are reasonable. Yet the effect remains the same. Your energy is diminished, your mind is less calm, and your capacity to act in accordance with reason is impaired. Recognizing this requires honest reflection on how interactions leave you feeling, and the cumulative impact on your mental and emotional state. If patterns of exhaustion, tension, or anxiety repeat, they are a clear signal that the relationship is harmful to your well-being. This strain can also interfere with personal growth. A mind burdened by emotional drain has less capacity for reflection, learning, and deliberate action. Energy that could be used to cultivate virtue, reason, or self-discipline is instead consumed by managing reactions, accommodating moods, and maintaining fragile stability. Over time, this diminishes the ability to live with clarity and purpose, as the focus shifts from acting wisely to surviving interaction. Recognizing emotional drain requires attention to both the frequency and the intensity of its effects. Occasional difficulty or disagreement is normal in any relationship, but repeated patterns of fatigue, tension, or anxiety indicate an imbalance. A relationship that consistently drains energy undermines the mind's calm, the heart's stability, and the capacity to act with focus and reason. The accumulation of these effects subtly shapes life, teaching the mind to tolerate strain, reducing clarity, and eroding inner peace.